important session. It's on the Campaign for Free Expression and International Blasphemy Rights Day, which I think is one of the most important things that CFI does. It's kind of what got me really involved and made me want to work for CFI in particular. So I'll pass it off to Michael.
Thank you, Steph. So Debbie is going to follow me and talk a little bit more about the particular history and goals of the Campaign for Free Expression and one of the major parts of the Campaign for Free Expression, which is International Blasphemy Rights Day. But I want to tell you, or at least lay some groundwork to understand why there is a Campaign for Free Expression, why there is International Blasphemy Rights Day, why CFI spends so much time on this issue, and some of the work that we've done on it. So this guy, Alexander On, this is where I'm going to start. I mentioned before that I got down to DC in 2012. It was around 2011, 2012 that I took over CFI's policy work. And I remember just reading some news about blasphemy-related stuff, and I saw that in early 2012, there was this young man named Alexander On in Indonesia, a civil servant who worked for the government. And Alexander, very much like myself and maybe like many of you in the room, was raised in a religious household. In his example, it was a Muslim household, and went through a period of thinking through the beliefs that he was raised into, questioning them, and starting to search for other people who maybe identify that way. Again, stressing the connection between some of the work that we're doing here and some of the stuff that was talked about yesterday in Melanie Brewster's presentation about the importance of community. So that's what Alexander was trying to do in Indonesia. 29-year-old guy, questioning religion, questioning the household that he was raised in. So after a couple months, he's posted a couple things on Facebook. He's created a Facebook page for the local atheists in his little community. And he's at work one day when an angry mob shows up to his workplace. They had found out about the Facebook page. And in Indonesia, if you weren't aware, it's illegal to be an atheist and to promote atheism. It's not a legally recognized religious tradition. There are only 6. And it's illegal to promote religion. It's also illegal to blaspheme. And it's illegal to incite religious hatred. So Alexander's at work one day, innocent work day, he's doing his job. Angry mob shows up, drags him outside, and starts beating him up. So the people in his workplace call the police. And they say, there's this dust up going on outside. One of our employees is getting beaten up. Can you please come? And so they come. They ask the mob what's going on. And they say, well, this guy's been posting all kinds of stuff on Facebook about how he's an atheist and how he doesn't think God exists. So they arrest Alexander On for promoting atheism, for lying on his government identification card because he claimed that he was an atheist now. But you can't claim that you're an atheist on your government identification card in Indonesia. For inciting religious hatred and for committing blasphemy. So this is one of the first stories that I really remember reading about after I had taken over the policy reins at CFI. And it really, I identified with it. I identified with the idea that there was someone who was in a similar position to myself. Young guy, again, raised in a religious household, questioning his beliefs, trying to find other people who are connected to this kind of thing. And I was in New York City at the time that I was doing this, so it was so easy for me to find other people who were connected to that kind of thing. Alexander had a much more difficult time. And so he was imprisoned. He went before a judge, and they eventually convicted him to 2.5 years in prison and a $10,000 US fine for inciting religious hatred in Indonesia, which is, of course, incredible because, if anything, the people that were inciting religious hatred were people that showed up at his workplace as a mob and beat him up. We have been in touch with Alexander's lawyers and some of his friends and family in Indonesia. We advocated on his behalf. We had protests outside the Indonesian embassy in DC a couple times. We had written letters to the ambassador for Indonesia in the United States. We had written letters to the Indonesian government. We had raised this case at the UN. Eventually, thankfully, Alexander was released early. He was released about halfway through his sentence, and he's problematically, though, living in hiding because of the fear of vigilante violence in Indonesia. But the thing about Alexander is that when his case first came about, and we got so involved in it, we started getting involved in a lot of other cases similar to Alexander's case. And we wanted to find a way to kind of connect all the work that we were doing. Now, it made sense that it was kind of all within the realm of the Office of Public Policy, and it was all within the realm of the UN work that we were doing, but there was no real campaign or anything that connected a lot of these issues. And we had launched years ago a campaign for free expression when we had first gotten involved with International Blasphemy Rights Day, and it kind of died out a bit. And so when Alexander's case came to the forefront, that was when we first relaunched the campaign for free expression. And Debbie, as I said, is going to talk a little bit more about that. But I just want to stress how important this guy is to so much of the work that we're doing. Someone who is in similar shoes to many of the positions that you're in, certainly me, and was a big inspiration for a lot of the free expression work that we're doing. So that's in 2012. Around the same time, I start getting messages from a woman named Ensaf Haider, who is telling me that her husband is in trouble in Saudi Arabia. Her husband is Raif Badawi, a blogger and activist in Saudi Arabia, who has been arrested for starting a discussion forum, a news forum for discussion in Saudi Arabia called, well, it's been translated a number of different ways, Saudi Liberal Network, Saudi Liberals. But basically what he did is he started, again, a discussion forum website where people who are interested in discussing social and political issues could go and engage in those conversations. Now, Raif had been harassed by the government for months, if not years, before his initial arrest in 2012. But when he was finally arrested in 2012, that was the last time that he had been arrested because he's not been released since then. And he's been through the court system, and he's had a number of different decisions against him. There have been appeals and all sorts of things. But again, the interesting thing about Raif's case is that, again, same year as the Alexander On case, 2012, here's a young guy who just wants to promote dialogue in a country in which that's illegal. And he starts a discussion forum and ends up getting arrested and charged for the things that were posted on the website that he didn't even write. But he was the host of the website in which blasphemy was occurring. A number of other charges against him, as you can imagine. Saudi Arabia, they'll throw the book at you. Fortunately, Raif, his wife, was able to get out of the country before a lot of the stuff that got really bad went down. And his 3 kids and his wife are living in Canada right now. They're in Quebec. And so his wife has been a tireless advocate for him. And so she started in 2012 when he was first arrested. She started emailing groups like the Center for Inquiry saying, I'm desperate for help. No one's coming to my assistance here. I need people to raise this case in Congress. I need people to raise this case at the United Nations. I need people to talk about this in the media, and I'm not getting any traction on it. And so the Center for Inquiry, again, kind of spurred by the Alexander On case and taking on all these different cases now related to free expression, took on the Badawi case as a central case for the work that we were doing on free expression. And so what we've done with the Badawi case is, again, raise the issue in Congress tirelessly. We've gone to the United Nations and delivered statements to the Human Rights Council, shaming Saudi Arabia for putting someone in prison simply for starting a website dedicated to dialogue, peaceful dialogue, and pressured Saudi officials and pressured a number of other foreign government officials. And actually, for the Canadians in the room, one of the more active governments right now in securing Badawi's freedom has been the Canadian government, in part because his family is in Canada. Now, it's going to be a long haul. Raif is in prison. He was sentenced to 10 years and 1,000 lashes, which was confirmed by the Supreme Court, although the Saudi government then announced that the Supreme Court never confirmed it. We're pretty sure that they did. It's kind of confusing to get trustworthy news out of Saudi Arabia. But the first 50 of the 1,000 lashes were given to him in January, which is obviously a very troubling thing for us. The somewhat fortunate thing about it is that Saudi Arabia didn't really realize what was going on in the world, I guess, at the time, and so they gave him the lashes like the same week that the Charlie Hebdo attack happened. And so everyone was already focused on free expression issues, and then it just so happens that one very brave person in the audience at the flogging, which was held outside of a mosque in Jeddah, videotaped it with their iPhone, posted it to YouTube, and it went viral. And so he has not been flogged since that first one in January, and that's very much in part to the increasing public pressure and public awareness of his case. So we're going to continue working on this case. It's one of the central cases. The thing about this case, though, is it actually goes a bit deeper than Raif. So here I am at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland. And this is the woman that actually inspired Raif to get active. That's his sister, Samar Badawi. Samar was a women's rights, or is a women's rights activist, human rights activist living in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah. And here she's at the Human Rights Council doing some activism, talking about her brother's case, but it actually goes a bit deeper. So, Samar Badawi in the mid-2000s is in Saudi Arabia, and her father has arranged for her to get married. And she says, nope, it's not the guy I want to get married to. I'm not doing that. So her father reports her to the police for disobeying her father, which is a crime in Saudi Arabia, and she goes to prison. When she's in prison, this guy offers to help her. His name is Walid Abu Al-Khair. He says, I'm a human rights lawyer in Saudi Arabia. I would love to help you with your case. Somewhere along the line, he gets her out of prison. They fall in love and have a kid and get married. So I was so ecstatic to be able to meet Samar Badawi because she is a human rights hero. She's been given awards by the State Department. She's still active in Saudi Arabia. She's a very brave person to still be living in Saudi Arabia, advocating for human rights reform. And so we've taken up her case as well. Right now she has a travel ban. She's not allowed to leave Saudi Arabia because she went to the Human Rights Council in 2014. And when she got back, they said, no, that's it. You're never leaving the country again. She's actually not been allowed to see her brother Raif either. She's only been allowed to see her husband once, which means that the father, Walid, has only been able to see his kid once, and his kid is about a year and a half years old now. 1.5 years old, sorry. And that's him right there. That's Walid Abu Al-Khair. I've spoken with Walid on the phone from Saudi Arabia in prison. I've also spoken with Raif on the phone from Saudi Arabia in prison. And the thing that strikes me about these people is that they're the kindest human beings possible. And they do nothing but heap praise on organizations that are trying to help them and say that all the people that are going to your protests and talking about this case and speaking out about it and posting on Twitter and Facebook, give them hope that one day they'll be free, and also remind them that there are people around the world that support them. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing in Saudi Arabia. The last situation I'll talk about is the work that we're doing in Bangladesh. So there are a number of different countries that CFI focuses on. Indonesia and Saudi Arabia are two of them. And a third one where we do a lot of work is Bangladesh. So around the same time, 2012, 2013, when we're starting to get really involved in this stuff, I get an email from this guy, Abhijit Roy. And he says, hey, Michael, I heard you're the new director of CFI's Office of Public Policy. I'm from Bangladesh. I live in the United States now. I don't know if you're aware of what's going on in Bangladesh, but there's a rise of Islamic extremism. They're demanding the death penalty for blasphemy. They're holding protests in the capital of hundreds of thousands of people demanding that the government institute a death penalty for blasphemy, that they mandate that women not be able to drive, that they have certain garb. And the government is responding to these demands not by pushing back against extremism, but by rounding up atheist and secular bloggers to try to appease the extremists. So are you aware of this? And I had no idea that this stuff was going on. So I started working very closely with Abhijit on a number of different cases in Bangladesh. And Abhijit was kind of our lifeline into Bangladesh. He knew people on the ground there. He connected us with family members, phone numbers, email addresses, just background and historical information about what was going on in Bangladesh. And one of the particular cases that we began working on is that of Asif Muhyiddin. So here's Asif and myself actually at the Reason for Change conference, which was held down the road, I think about a month ago or a little over a month ago. We invited him here to the United States. Currently he's in Germany to speak at our conference. So Asif's story is this. Asif, again, also raised in kind of a Muslim household, went through a period of questioning his beliefs, and started writing about it on blogs in Bangladesh and talking about the importance of secular government and of fighting back against Islamic extremism. And in 2013, Asif is going to work one day as an engineer in Dhaka, and he's attacked by Islamic extremists with machetes and barely survives. Barely survives. He's in the hospital, recovering for a couple months. He finally gets out of the hospital. He goes home, and there's a knock on his door, and it's the police, and they say, Asif, you're under arrest for blasphemy. We're taking you to prison now. So here's a guy who's barely recovered from an attack on his life, who is now being imprisoned for blasphemy. And this happens in 2013. And Abhijit is a central person for us in working on Asif's case. And like Asif, many others were arrested with him. In fact, there were at least 4 other bloggers who were arrested at the time that Asif was arrested, and they were all part of the same blog network, the Muktamona blog network. There's also another blog network that exists, although it's different now. It's called the Somewhere in the Blog network. Anyway, Asif spoke at the conference, and I think those remarks will be up on YouTube soon enough, hopefully. But one of the things he said is that when he was in prison in Bangladesh, he was kind of losing hope that he was going to get out in 2013. And his sister, who Abhijit had connected us with, came to him in prison and said, "You'll never believe it. This American-based organization, the Center for Inquiry, has decided that they're going to take up your case and try to fight for your freedom." And he said that was the first time that he felt hope in prison. And eventually we were able to work with a couple other organizations to get him out of prison. He's now seeking asylum in Germany. That's why he came to the US from Germany, and has been a tireless advocate for issues in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, the story ends on a sad note. Abhijit Roy, as I said, who was our lifeline, very important person in Bangladesh, in January had gone back to Bangladesh. There's a book fair in Dhaka every year in Bangladesh. It's a massive book fair where all kinds of authors related to Bangladesh, especially political and social issues, are able to go. It's as much a social event as it is selling books. But Abhijit had written dozens of books about secularism and science and all kinds of things. I mean, he was defending secular government in Bangladesh, but he was also writing about things related to LGBT rights in Bangladesh, which is a kind of foreign issue in Bangladesh. Very brave person. And he went back with his wife to this book fair, as he did every single year from the United States. And as he was leaving at night with his wife, he was attacked by 4 individuals with machetes, and he was murdered on the streets of Bangladesh. His wife was also injured in the attack, but narrowly survived and is now back in the United States. The really sad thing about this is that Abhijit spent so much of his time trying to get attention on issues in Bangladesh, and it was only in his death that the media finally started to pick up on what was going on in Bangladesh. The even sadder thing is that that was only the first murder of an atheist blogger in Bangladesh this year. And since then, 2 people who were known associates and bloggers with Abhijit have been murdered in Bangladesh. As a result of that, CFI has used its connections that were very much created through our relationship with Abhijit, but through others like Asif, and tried to connect with individuals who are in Bangladesh who are at risk, and try to help them escape that country right now and get to a safe place. And so you might have seen that about a month or 2 ago, we launched something called the Free Thought Emergency Fund. The Free Thought Emergency Fund, the first iteration of it, is to raise funds to help us relocate individuals who are at risk in Bangladesh, who are on death hit lists, on terror lists, and who are the next people in line for an attack from Islamic extremist groups in Bangladesh. So these stories that I'm talking about, I think it's really important to understand the landscape of religious freedom around the world. But these are the stories that we feel are inspiring to us or captivating to us and really get our juice going, and are why we think it's so important that we band together and create as much unity as possible for the right to freedom of expression, for the right to freedom of belief, for the right to freedom of religion. And now I'm going to hand it over to Debbie, who's going to talk a little bit more about how we've taken some of these cases, kind of coalesced them into a campaign, and how we also have one particular day every year, which is, as it happens, coming up, in which we talk about these kinds of things. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. I really appreciate it.